Today we're going over one of the most high-risk professions in the entire universe, the Psyker.
Initiating crowd control! Dead witch!
Oh.
Nice.
And we're going over everything, and I mean everything, from how to get the most head all the way to where our true power comes from.
The power of friendship. Oh, shit.
And hopefully by the end of it, you can decide on if you yourself want to become a Psyker main on Darktide, because it really will be all about your personal taste by the end of this. But to light this off with my personal taste, you already know we have to start with how to become a magical space wizard that really sinks the competition.
Can't help it, that's okay.
And no, it's not pay $8 because Darktide's closer to 40. Our powers actually come from an alternate dimension of pure psychic energy where all your hopes and dreams go to die.
Swag like Ohio.
And it's so much worse than Ohio. It's the warp. And for those that are new to Warhammer stuff and don't really understand Ohio or space magic, well, nobody really understands Ohio, but this was a space built from a millennia of memes and broken dreams. And it still feeds off of them today. And all that raw power that constantly flowed into it literally gave birth to the 4 dark gods of chaos. Khorne, the blood god, all about raw aggression and power. Tzeentch, the birdman and changer of ways. Slaanesh, the god of ecstasy, pleasure, and crop tops. And finally Nurgle, who's our first direct and main threat in Darktide. For how long Nurgle remains the main threat before the other gods decide they want a piece of us is really only a matter of time, and they were all born in the warp. So they're essentially trapped there, which is why they're constantly trying to break out into the material universe to tear us apart with their overwhelming influence.
Big gun for my dream!
Don't worry, we're never waking up from this dream, but at least we weren't foolish enough to try and grasp its unholy power without the iron will of the Emperor, because anyone arrogant enough to try will end up as Abominations, which basically means as a Psyker, you are very likely to end up just turning into a tentacle monster blob. Which I know some of you would actually enjoy, and if you do, let me know in the comments so I can get a hold of you. Like you can see, the temps of the dark gods are infinite, and my weak, simple mind almost succumbed to the tentacly goodness, but my iron faith in the Emperor saved me. So now I'm going to show you what happens to your mind if you succumb to the darkness in Darktide. It literally starts tearing your mind apart as you use too much of it. But you have to stay strong as Psykers because it's our job not to get tempted into breaking our faith to the Emperor and to smite down his foes with force lightning. I mean brain burst and force push. I mean psychic wrath. God, man, space wizards are awfully similar to the other kind of space wizards. That's crazy, bro.
These aren't the droids you're looking for.
Oh, okay, Obi-Wan, I'll just subscribe and like the video instead while we talk about the 3 kinds of space wizards to make sure we know our role. And the first kind is the fuel rod, and I literally mean a fuel rod for our glorious emperors, Astronomicon, not to be confused with the Necronomicon from the Evil Dead. But it's literally a giant space beacon built for the sole purpose to travel through the warp faster than the speed of light so we can go fight aliens better. Its only drawback is that it requires thousands of space wizards to be sacrificed as fuel to function, so that all of our navigator space wizards whose job is to make sure the giant ships we use to fight aliens don't get lost in the warp, or even worse, Ohio. But we don't have to worry about any of that because we're battle space wizards.
Throne's sake! I refuse to deal with that again.
And we're super strong, I promise. We'll never forget where we are because as we saw earlier, we're technically just Sith Lords without the lightsabers. Instead, we get force weapons. They're going to come in the basics of swords, axes, and staffs, and there's a couple more, but that's literally the basics that we're going to see in Darktide. And the greatest part about these weapons is they are way more lethal than a lightsaber. You literally get to channel the power of the warp directly into your weapon, which means anything that you manage to even give a paper cut is going to get a raw blast of your sick, twisted mind's psychic warp energy channeled directly into them, tearing them apart from the inside out. And the sword is going to be more focused on taking out single targets at the moment. There's probably an AoE variant, but the staff is really the AoE function that we'll be getting in Darktide for now. As for the axe, I'm not even sure if we have it in the game yet. It didn't really look like it was data mined, so I guess we'll have to see. But hopefully as we grow more powerful, we can differentiate a little better and interchange our moves in-game, because there's technically 5 schools of space wizardry, and from the most recent trailer, it looks like we're going to be getting like a hybrid of multiple kinds of moves with a lot more of a warp fire bleed effect focus on our abilities, and literally a flamethrower. So we're just going to have to be really careful, because if we get too strong, the Space Marines come and so we won't think about those for now, because we have Warhammer's version of Force Lightning, which basically is my wet dream to RP as Emperor Palpatine, but I love Warhammer more. So now I get the best of both worlds, instead of the worst of one. And hopefully Fat Shark doesn't EA Games this one, but they did a great job with Vermintide too, so I'm sure we have nothing to worry about. So I've talked about the weapons. You're probably thinking, what's Psyker's true role? What's it really suited for? And I think Psyker in Darktide is better suited towards single target build, focused on dealing with the biggest, juiciest elite monsters, so that you can really flex on your teammates and let them take out the rabble. Because honestly, when you get to start spamming Brain Burst, even the strongest, beefiest elites like the Plague Ogryn get melted like butter, and that's where you really get to shine. And the best combo we found during the last beta was the 4-sword single target variant with the shotgun. This basically lets you deal with every single situation you ran into and hard carry your team, and basically just made you an all-round menace. But very clearly that's going to change on live when the game actually comes out, because we're getting to see so many more weapons with each trailer. Just in this one, we got to see a last pistol and a bunch of new moves that we didn't have in the last closed beta, so that means we might get a lot more for the other characters too. So I honestly can't wait to see what we end up getting, but this should be a pretty reliable early game combo, at least for now, because I ended up testing it myself. But a really good Psyker will hard carry a lobby and has the opportunity to have a way bigger presence, in my opinion, than the other characters, in its ability just to be a real showstopper carrying everybody. And the only real downside I felt was when you got overwhelmed by hordes of enemies, but that's clearly going to change with the addition of like the psychic fire burn that happened on like all your abilities, and literally the warp flamethrower that we get in the live version of the game from the trailer. It was actually just like one of the coolest things I've seen. And it honestly felt like they're just letting you choose to be either a single target menace or an AoE god, which is really good for the game. And I hope they do that for the rest of the characters too. And personally, when it actually comes out, I'm still probably going to prefer the single target variant of Psyker, just because it added a level to the party that I felt was almost irreplaceable. Because even if you are getting overwhelmed, that's where the Ogryn bodyguards are there for. They come in, stand there, be the best boys, and make sure we don't get hit. And after all my experience on playing the beta as a Psyker or having them in my party, they really do give that solid power fantasy of being able to deal with every situation while having the greatest single target potential. Because let's be honest, Psykers, space wizards, they're renowned for being the absolute pinnacle of power in the Warhammer universe, just because of how strong the warp actually is. Which is weird, because in Darktide they let us out of sight of our handlers, probably better known as commissars, that are supposed to be supervising us, just in case we dive a little too deep into the warp and go insane or worse. Bring back a super demon from the depths of hell that possesses us and kills all of our teammates. So I don't actually know if that confirms Commissar as the next character, because we've seen multiple tech priests walking around in cinematics, but I would like to think Commissar or tech priest. Honestly, both would be really cool. But Psykers aren't supposed to be allowed out of sights of Commissars. And if you've gotten here without subscribing, the Commissar might be coming for you first.